Lena had always believed in the goodness of life. As a young girl, she had dreamed of a family, a home filled with love and laughter. She had been raised with the idea that a woman's worth lay in the tenderness she gave her husband and the children she bore. But as she stood in the crumbling farmhouse, with bruises covering her arms and tears streaking her face, she realized how naive those dreams had been. Her husband, Mark, was not the man she had fallen in love with. Once full of warmth and charm, he had become bitter over the years, his dreams shattered by hard work on a failing farm. Mark's resentment toward her grew with each passing year, especially after the birth of their 3 daughters. He had longed 4 sons, children who could help him on the farm, children who could carry on his name. But each time Lena gave birth to another girl, his anger escalated. He didn't see them as blessings, he saw them as burdens. And Lena, as the one who had failed him, bore the brunt of his frustrations. The first time he hit her, she had been in shock. Her hands trembled as she tried to make sense of it, but her fear was drowned out by his rage. Each time she gave him another girl, the abuse grew. It was a cycle she had come to accept as a way of life. She loved her daughters Mariella and Grace with all her heart, but she had grown weary. She had endured it all, never once believing that she could leave, that there could be something better. The bruises on her body had become a part of her identity. The black eye, the swollen lip, the bruised ribs, they were just another part of her reality. Mark's drunken rages had become more frequent, and each night, she feared that one of these days, she wouldn't make it through. But she kept going. For her daughters, they were the only reason she still had the strength to face another day. Tonight, though, something felt different. Mark had come home drunk, his words slurred and his face twisted with anger. Another girl, Lena, another failure. His voice was like venom, each word designed to hurt. The house seemed smaller, the walls closing in around her as he stood there, towering over her, his fists clenched, his eyes burned with fury. You can't even give me a son. You worthless. Before he could finish, Lena heard the front door slam open with a force that rattled the entire house. The sound of heavy boots on the floorboards interrupted Mark's tirade. Lena froze, not knowing who would be stepping into the nightmare unfolding before her. Then, a voice, deep and commanding, rang out. Is everything all right in here? Lena looked up, her heart racing. A tall man stood in the doorway, his silhouette outlined by the dim light outside. He was a stranger, but there was something about him that made her feel safe, something about the way he held himself, like a force of nature, calm and unwavering. Mark turned to face the man, his anger not subsiding. Get out of my house, stranger. This is none of your business, Mark snarled. The man Samuel, he would later introduce himself as, didn't flinch. Instead, his eyes locked with Mark's, his jaw set with the determination of someone who had seen cruelty before. I think it is my business, Samuel said, stepping forward, his boots making a deliberate, steady sound as he moved toward Mark. There was something about his presence that made Lena's heart beat faster, a mix of fear and hope. Mark scowled, clearly intoxicated and unsteady on his feet. You're making a mistake, friend, he slurred, but Samuel didn't take a step back. Without warning, he lunged at Mark, his hand connecting with Mark's jaw, with a brutal force that sent Mark crashing to the floor. Lena gasped, her heart racing with a mix of fear and disbelief. The man didn't kill Mark. He didn't even draw a weapon. He simply knocked him down, incapacitating him with one swift motion. Mark groaned in the dust, his pride shattered. Get out of here. Now, Samuel commanded, his voice calm but full of authority. Mark didn't need any more encouragement. He stumbled to his feet, eyes wide with humiliation, and backed away. His pride was broken, and without another word, he staggered toward the door and left, leaving Lena in stunned silence. Lena's breath caught in her throat. For a long moment, she didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the situation. Was this man her savior? Was it truly over? Her hand trembled as she looked at Samuel, the stranger who had just intervened in her life. Are you all right? Samuel asked, his voice softening as he turned to her. His eyes held no judgment, only concern. For the first time in years, Lena felt like someone cared. Lena sat frozen on the floor, her mind struggling to comprehend the scene that had just unfolded. Mark, her brutal husband, was gone, humiliated, and barely able to stand. But the man, this stranger who had come to her aid, was still there, standing like a mountain between her and the life she had known. Samuel Stone was an enigma. There was something in his eyes that Lena couldn't quite place. Something I hadn't seen in years, kindness perhaps, or maybe something else entirely. But she had no time to ponder it. The ringing silence of the house, the echoes of Mark's angry words still reverberating in her mind, kept her in a state of shock. Are you all right? Samuel's voice cut through the haze of her thoughts. His deep, calming tone contrasted sharply with the violence that had just taken place. Lena couldn't answer. She could barely even breathe, let alone speak. He seemed to understand. With a subtle nod, Samuel moved closer, his steps deliberate but gentle. He knelt before her, placing a hand on her shoulder, firm but not overpowering. His touch was a grounding force in the chaos of her life, a small flicker of hope she hadn't known she could still feel. I'm here to help you, he said softly, his eyes scanning her face, then drifting to the bruises that marked her skin. You don't have to be alone anymore. Lena looked up at him, her heart racing. Was he offering what she thought he was? Was he suggesting that she could leave this hell behind? The prospect of safety, of freedom, felt like a distant fantasy, one she had almost given up on. Her breath caught in her throat. But I don't know you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her hand clutched the fabric of her dress as if holding on to a shred of the life she had known, no matter how painful. How can I trust you? How do I know you won't hurt me too? Samuel's face softened. He understood the fear in her eyes. He had seen it before. He had been through his own battles, fought his own demons. But one thing he knew for sure was that he couldn't leave a woman and her children to suffer like this. You don't have to trust me right away, he said, his voice low and steady. But I can promise you, you're safe with me. I don't want anything from you. You and your girls deserve peace, and I can offer that. I have a ranch, a place where you won't have to hide anymore. Lena shook her head, the weight of her years of suffering weighing heavily on her shoulders. I can't just leave, she said, her voice breaking. This is all I've known. I've never been anywhere else. What if I fail again? What if I can't protect my daughters? Samuel stood up, his presence filling the room. You don't have to protect them alone anymore. You don't have to do it all. I'll help you. We'll take care of each other. Together. Lena blinked back tears, her mind a whirl of conflicting emotions. She felt a strange pull toward Samuel, something beyond gratitude. There was a raw honesty in him, a quiet strength that spoke to her on a level she didn't fully understand. Could she leave everything behind and trust him? Could she trust him with her heart? And more importantly, could she trust herself to make the right choice for her daughters? Before she could respond, a small voice broke the tension. Mama, is he, is he here to take us away? It was Mary, her eldest daughter, standing in the doorway, clutching her doll. Her innocent eyes, wide with fear, looked between Lena and the stranger. Lena's heart clenched as she saw the worry on her daughter's face. She couldn't protect them from the pain and confusion they had already lived through, but she could give them something more. She could give them hope. She glanced at Samuel, then back to her daughter. Yes, sweetheart, she said softly, her voice filled with a tenderness she hadn't known she had left. He's here to help us. Mary's face softened, and for the first time in a long while Lena saw a glimmer of trust in her eyes, but it was a fragile hope, one that could be shattered with the wrong choice. Lena stood up, slowly, feeling the ache of her battered body, but her heart was stronger now, not because of the promises Samuel made, but because of the hope that was beginning to take root in her chest. It was a quiet, tentative hope, but it was there, and it had to be enough. Samuel reached out a hand, his eyes full of sincerity. I can't undo what's been done to you, Lena, but I can give you a chance at something better. Something real. Lena hesitated, but then she took his hand. And in that moment, she knew. She knew she wasn't just leaving Mark and the farmhouse behind. She was leaving fear, pain, and the years of torment behind as well. With Samuel, there was a real chance for a future, for her daughters, for herself. All right, Lena said, her voice strong now, her decision made. Let's go. Samuel smiled, his eyes softening. It wasn't a smile of triumph, but one of understanding, of shared hope. You won't regret this, Lena. I promise you. As they walked out of the house together, Lena felt the weight of her past begin to lift. The open plains stretched before her, a new beginning waiting on the horizon. Lena had always believed in fate. After everything she had endured, she'd clung to the fragile thread of hope that someday, somehow, things would get better. But leaving Mark had felt impossible until now. Now, as Samuel helped her gather her things, Lena found herself stepping into a future she hadn't dared to imagine. It wasn't just about escaping the past. It was about taking control of her life, reclaiming something that had long been stolen from her. The farmhouse, once a place of memories, of warmth and sorrow intertwined, was now a distant echo. The weight of Mark's cruelty, the sting of his insults, the harshness of his violence, these things still clung to her. But now, they were fading. With each step toward the ranch, Lena's burden seemed lighter. Her daughters, wide-eyed and unsure, huddled close to her. They too were embarking on something unknown, something that had the potential to either heal or destroy. Are you sure about this? Samuel asked, his voice low as he walked beside her. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Samuel's face was illuminated by the soft light, his strong jawline softened by the warmth of the evening. He had done the unthinkable, intervened when no one else would end. Now, he was offering her a new life. But even he knew the journey ahead would be difficult. Lena's heart raced, a mixture of excitement and fear swirling within her. Could she trust this man with her future? Could she trust herself to make the right choice? Her heart had been broken so many times before, and now, she was allowing herself to trust again. It felt like stepping off a cliff, frightening, but with a flicker of hope, I'm sure. She replied softly, her voice steady but carrying the weight of her decision. I have to be For my daughters. Samuel gave a small nod, a quiet understanding passing between them. It wasn't just about him offering her a way out. It was about her finding the courage to walk through that door, to leave behind the life that had nearly destroyed her. And yet, despite the pain of the past, there was a strange comfort in the uncertainty of the future. They reached the edge of the property. The wide stretch of land before them both overwhelming and beautiful. The wind tugged at Lena's hair, and she felt, for the first time in a long while, the freedom to breathe deeply. The vastness of the world felt like a blank canvas, one she could paint however she chose. "Do you like the ranch?" Samuel asked, breaking the silence. His voice was gentle, as if he were testing the waters, unsure of how she felt about the place that had become his sanctuary. His eyes softened as he glanced at her, as if waiting for her judgment. Lena took a deep breath, her heart full of mixed emotions. "It's beautiful," she whispered, glancing at the rolling hills, the tall grasses swaying in the wind. "I never imagined I'd be here. A place like this. It's so different from everything I've known." "But there's more than just land here," Samuel said, his voice carrying a depth of meaning. "There's peace, and I'll do everything I can to make sure you and your daughters find that peace." His words hung in the air, and Lena's chest tightened. There was something in his eyes, something that went beyond kindness. It was a promise, one that made her heart ache with longing. Could she really believe that peace was possible? Could she trust him enough to make it real? The evening was quiet, save for the sounds of their footsteps crunching against the gravel road. The closer they got to the ranch, the more Lena felt the tension in her chest ease. They arrived at a small, simple cabin, nestled at the edge of the property. The roof was made of weathered wood, the windows small but clean. It wasn't grand, but it was warm, inviting. "We'll stay here tonight," Samuel said as he opened the door, ushering them inside. "I'll make sure you're settled before we head to the main house tomorrow." Lena nodded, her eyes scanning the modest interior. It was more than she could have hoped for, more than she ever imagined she'd find. It was safe. And for the first time in years, Lena felt like she could finally breathe. Samuel moved to the fire, stoking it with fresh logs. The warmth of the flames contrasted with the chill in the air, and Lena felt herself relax. The exhaustion of the journey weighing on her, she turned to face her daughters, who were now sitting on the floor, watching her with curiosity. She smiled at them, her heart swelling with love. "This is our new home," she said softly. "We're going to be all right." But as the fire crackled and the night grew darker, Lena couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease deep inside her. The night was quiet, but there was something haunting in the air, something she couldn't quite place. It wasn't the stillness of the ranch. It was the feeling that something was lurking just beyond her reach. Samuel, too, seemed to sense it. He was more watchful than usual, his brow furrowed as he worked near the fire. Lena's pulse quickened. The weight of the past had left its mark on her, and now, as she sat there in the warmth of the cabin, she couldn't shake the feeling that the peace she had come to find might be more fragile than she had hoped. Suddenly, the sound of a distant horse neighing broke the stillness. The wind howled, and the hairs on the back of Lena's neck stood up. Something was out there. "Samuel," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "What was that?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the door, his hand resting on the rifle that leaned against the wall. There was a moment of silence before he spoke, his voice low and steady. "I don't know," he said, his tone darker than before. "But it's not good. Stay here." Lena's heart raced as Samuel grabbed his rifle and headed for the door, leaving her alone with the children. The air inside the cabin seemed to grow colder, and Lena's pulse raced with a new fear. Outside, the wind howled louder, carrying the faint echo of hooves pounding against the earth. Lena's chest tightened as she realized whatever was out there was closing in. The cabin was eerily silent after Samuel had disappeared into the night. Lena's heart raced, every nerve tingling with a sense of danger that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The wind howled outside, but it wasn't just the storm that made her skin crawl. It was the unmistakable feeling that something was closing in on them. Her daughters huddled near the fire, their faces filled with confusion and fear. Mary clutched her doll tightly, her wide eyes flicking between Lena and the door. Grace, too young to understand, felt the tension in the air, her small body trembling in Lena's arms. The quiet was broken by the sound of hooves. The rhythmic pounding against the earth grew louder, almost methodical. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She looked out the small window, straining to see through the darkness. The world beyond the cabin felt oppressive, as if the very land itself was closing in on them. Then came a voice, low, gravelly, and full of venom. "I know you're in there, Stone. You can't hide from us." Lena froze, her blood running cold. The man's words were clear. They weren't just after Samuel, they were after all of them. Panic surged through her chest, but she forced herself to stay still. She couldn't show weakness. Not now. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Who were these men? What did they want with Samuel? Before she could process further, a violent knock rattled the door. The voice outside came again, this time more threatening. "We'll burn this place to the ground, Stone. You're not welcome here." Lena's hands trembled as she moved toward the door, her mind in chaos. Her heart raced. What should she do? Was Samuel safe? Just then, Samuel's voice rang out from the darkness, urgent and sharp. "Lena, lock the door. Stay inside." With the girls, she rushed to lock the door, her hands shaking with fear and determination. Through the cracks, she glimpsed shadowy figures moving in the night. They weren't leaving, they were waiting. Samuel returned, his face grim but resolute. "They're coming for us, but we won't run. We'll face this together." Lena's heart pounded as she glanced at her daughters, holding on to the faint hope that together they could survive whatever was coming. The night had just begun, and it was clear, the fight for their lives had only just started. The night felt as if it were holding its breath, suspended in a tense silence that stretched across the cabin like a heavy shroud. Lena stood frozen, every muscle in her body wound tight with fear. Her daughters clung to her, the air around them thick with the weight of uncertainty. Every creak in the walls, every rustle of the wind, seemed to whisper of something terrible approaching. Samuel had said they wouldn't stop. He had been right, but the truth of his words was heavier now than ever before. Lena glanced towards the door. Shadows shifted just beyond the window, figures she could barely make out, but their presence was undeniable. The men were still out there, waiting for something, waiting for Samuel, waiting for them. "Lena, we can't stay here," Samuel said quietly, his voice cutting through the stillness. He had returned to the cabin, his face grim but determined. "They know we're here. They're not leaving until they get what they want." Lena turned to him, her heart pounding, as she saw the darkness in his eyes. There was fear, their fear, for them, for her daughters. He wasn't just fighting for survival now, he was fighting to protect them, and something inside her stirred at the depth of that commitment. A part of her, the part that had been broken for so long, wanted to believe in him, wanted to believe that he could keep them safe. But the stakes were too high. She couldn't allow herself to hope. "Not yet." "Where do we go?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "If we run, they'll find us." Samuel's gaze softened as he stepped closer, his eyes dark with worry, but also something else, a quiet promise. "We'll fight, we'll stand our ground. I won't let them take you." His words sent a shockwave through Lena's chest. He didn't say them out of bravado. They weren't empty promises, they were a vow. And in that moment, something shifted between them. She saw him then, not just as the man who had saved her from a brutal past, but as the man she could trust with her future, as the man she wanted beside her, fighting by her side. And though the fear still gripped her, there was something else, too, something that wasn't just fear. It was something warm, something fragile, hope. But then, the door shuddered again, violently this time, the wood splintering under the force of the blows. "Stone." The voice was unmistakable now, louder, angrier, full of hatred. "Open up, we're not here for a chat, we're here for blood." Lena's heart raced as Samuel reached for the rifle. The weight of the gun in his hand was heavy, but his grip was firm, resolute. He turned to her, his expression hardening. "Get the girls to the back of the cabin. Stay low, stay quiet, don't come out until I say so." Lena hesitated, her eyes locking with his. There was a brief, electric pause, a moment when their worlds collided in a rush of urgency and understanding. Her body screamed to stay with him, to fight beside him, but she knew what he was asking. He was asking her to trust him. With a nod, Lena moved swiftly, ushering the girls to the back room. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. Her heart split between the terror of the situation and the deep, growing feeling inside her for Samuel. He had risked everything to protect her, to protect them. She had never known a love like that, so fierce, so protective, so selfless. The door splintered again with a deafening crack. "You've had your chance, Stone," the voice outside hissed. "Now you'll pay." Lena's blood ran cold as she heard the men begin to force their way in. She quickly huddled the girls behind the cabin's farthest wall, holding her breath. It felt as though everything, the past, the pain, the violence, was collapsing in on her. But then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a struggle, the sharp crack of a shot in the night, and then Samuel's voice. "Stay back, Lena." Her heart stopped, her feet moved before her mind could catch up, and she was at the door before she realized what she was doing. She had to help him, she had to be with him. They had come so far. She couldn't let him fight alone. Lena threw open the door just as the final blast rang out. There, in the fading light of the fire, Samuel stood, bloodied but unbroken. His eyes, full of anger and determination, met hers. He hadn't fallen. He was still standing. And in that moment, with the night full of smoke and blood, Lena knew that their fight wasn't over. But with Samuel by her side, it felt like they might just have a chance to survive together. The smoke from the burning cabin door hung heavy in the air, its acrid scent mingling with the sharp tank of blood. Lena's heart pounded in her chest, her breath shallow as she looked at Samuel, standing tall amidst the chaos. The men had retreated for now, their plans thwarted by the ferocity of Samuel's defense. But Lena knew it wasn't over. She felt it deep in her bones, to calm before the storm. Samuel's face was a mask of grit and resolve, but his shirt was torn. blood staining his side where a bullet had grazed him. Despite the injury, he stood with a quiet strength that took Lena's breath away. Her hands shook as she moved toward him, her heart thundering in her chest. The intensity of the moment, the adrenaline, the fear, they had all merged into something else. "Now, you're hurt," she whispered, reaching for his arm, her fingers brushing against his torn shirt. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the raw determination of a man who had fought not just for his life, but for theirs. Her voice broke slightly. "You should rest, Samuel. You can't keep fighting like this." He didn't pull away from her touch, but his jaw tightened. "I'll rest when we're safe." His voice was low, tinged with the pain he wasn't showing. But Lena could feel it, the exhaustion, the unspoken weight of everything he'd been through. He was more than just a protector now. He was someone she couldn't lose. Lena's heart ached, her emotions swirling. She wasn't used to feeling like this, to caring so deeply for someone who wasn't just a figment of hope. Samuel had become her reality, a constant in the storm. And she wasn't sure when it had happened, when the man who had stepped into her life with nothing but a promise of protection had become the one person she couldn't imagine living without. The cabin was still standing, but it felt fragile, as though the ground beneath them was about to give way. The men outside would return, of that, she was certain. But for now, she allowed herself a brief moment of peace, a fleeting sense of safety. Her hand rested against Samuel's arm, and he didn't move away. In that small act of intimacy, something shifted between them, something raw and real. He looked at her then, his blue eyes dark with exhaustion but filled with something else. "Lena," he said her name like a prayer, his voice hoarse as if the weight of everything that had happened and everything that would happen was pressing on him too. "You don't have to stay. You and the girls can leave. Get as far away as possible. I'll hold them off." Lena shook her head, a fierce determination rising within her. "I'm not going anywhere without you," she said firmly, her voice steady. "You've already given so much. You've protected us. Now we fight together." His gaze softened, and for a brief moment, his guard slipped. The hard lines of his face relaxed, and for the first time since the battle began, he allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. He stepped closer, the space between them closing until they were nearly touching. His breath was warm against her skin, his body strong and steady. But it was the look in his eyes that captured her, the tenderness, the quiet promise that he wasn't just protecting her and her daughters. He was offering her a life, something more than survival. Samuel reached out, his hand brushing gently against her cheek. The touch was soft, almost reverent. "You're incredible, you know that," he murmured. "You've been through more than anyone should ever endure, and yet you're still standing. You still believe. I don't deserve someone like you." Lena shook her head, her heart swelling. "You do deserve it. You deserve peace, Samuel, and I've never felt safer than I do when I'm with you." There it was, the truth that had been growing between them, slowly, quietly, until it couldn't be denied anymore. She was falling for him, falling for the man who had saved her from the darkness. The man who had fought for her and her children, even when he had nothing left to give. "I don't know what the future holds," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I know one thing, I'm not letting you go. Not now, not ever." Before Lena could respond, the distant sound of horses' hooves grew louder, shattering the fragile moment they had found. Her stomach sank, and Samuel's expression hardened. The men were coming back, but this time, it was different. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something worth living, for each other. Lena tightened her grip on Samuel's hand, her heart beating as one with his. She didn't know what the morning would bring, but with him by her side, she was ready to face whatever came their way, together. The tension in the air thickened, the distant sound of hooves growing louder with each passing moment. Lena could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest, the fear clawing at her insides. The men outside were coming back, by anger, desperation, and the blood that had been spilled. They were determined, relentless. But so were Samuel and Lena. The fire inside the cabin had burned low, the soft glow casting long shadows across the walls. Lena glanced at Samuel, his face set in grim determination, his hand resting on the rifle beside him. His earlier injuries hadn't slowed him. His eyes, those deep, haunted eyes, spoke of a man who had seen too much, but also of someone who would fight for what mattered most. And right now, what mattered most was her daughters, and the life they had only just begun to build. Lena reached for his hand, her fingers trembling slightly. "We're in this together," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos closing in around them. Samuel nodded, squeezing her hand in return. "Always." The sound of the horses grew louder, now just on the other side of the clearing. Their shadows stretched, ominous and threatening. Lena's breath caught in her throat as she realized they had no choice now. There was no escaping. They would have to face whatever was coming together. "You stay here with the girls," Samuel said, his voice firm. "I'll take care of it." Lena opened her mouth to protest, but his gaze stopped her. "Trust me, I'll be back." His words were simple, but in them, she felt the weight of everything they had fought for. He wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting for Hereford, their future. I trust you, Lena whispered, her voice barely audible. She watched as he moved toward the door, every step full of purpose, every movement deliberate. For the briefest moment, their eyes locked, and in that instant, it felt like everything around them disappeared. The battle, the bloodshed, the past, all of it was just noise in the background. All that mattered was the connection they shared, the bond that had grown stronger with every passing moment. The door swung open with a creak, and Samuel stepped into the night, the cold air hitting his face. Lena held her breath, waiting. The minutes felt like hours, each second stretching into eternity. She could hear Samuel's voice outside, low and commanding, but she couldn't make out the words. It was a standoff, a moment that would decide everything. Then, the first shot rang out. Lena's heart leaped into her throat, and instinctively she moved to the door. But she stopped herself. No, Samuel had told her to stay back. She had to trust him. Another shot followed. Then silence. It felt like the world had come to a standstill, each second stretching longer than the last. Lena stood, frozen, her body shaking as she waited for any sign. Finally, Samuel's voice came through the door, hoarse but steady. It's over, they're gone. Lena's breath exploded from her chest, relief flooding her body. She rushed to the door, throwing it open to find Samuel standing there, bloodied but alive. His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, everything in the world felt right again. He was bruised, battered, but he was here. He was standing, and they were still together. Are you hurt? Lena asked, her voice filled with concern as she reached out to him. He nodded, but there was a faint smile tugging at his lips. I'm fine, he said, his voice filled with quiet strength. They won't be coming back. Lena felt tears sting her eyes as she moved closer to him, wrapping her arms around him. The danger, the fear, it had all been too much. But now, standing in the dim light of the cabin, with the sounds of their victory settling into the distance, she knew this was the moment they had both been waiting for. With the night finally behind them, Samuel held her close, and in his embrace, Lena felt the weight of all the broken pieces inside her finally start to heal. The love they shared, the strength they had given each other, was something that would endure. I don't know what comes next, Samuel murmured into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. But I'll face it with you. Whatever it is. Lena pulled back slightly, looking up into his eyes, her heart swelling with something deeper than just love, something that had been born from pain, from survival, and from the trust they had built together. Whatever comes next, she said softly, we'll face it together. The first light of dawn broke through the horizon, painting the world in golden hues. The quiet morning felt surreal, the fresh air carrying the scent of earth and the promise of a new beginning. For the first time in years, Lena allowed herself to breathe deeply, the weight of the past finally beginning to lift. Standing beside her, Samuel seemed to absorb the peace that now surrounded them. His presence, once a shield against the brutality of life, now felt like a promise of safety, of a future. The struggles of the past still lingered, but now, with Samuel by her side, Lena saw only possibility. She didn't just want to survive anymore. She wanted to live. We made it, she whispered, almost in disbelief. Her voice trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the relief of having reached the other side. Samuel looked at her, his eyes dark but filled with tenderness. He stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers, and in that simple touch, everything fell into place. We made it together. Lena's heart fluttered at his words. The weight of everything they'd endured, the pain, the loss, the uncertainty, seemed insignificant compared to the quiet strength they had found in each other. He wasn't just her protector anymore. He was her partner, the man she could trust with her heart, her future, and her children's lives. I never thought I'd feel this way again, she confessed softly. After everything, I didn't believe I could ever truly be happy. But now, with you, I feel like I'm finally home. Samuel's expression softened, and he took her hand in both of his touch firm and warm. You're home, Lena, and I'll never let you leave it. A smile tugged at her lips, and for the first time in years, it was real, a smile that didn't hide the scars of her past, but embraced the love they had fought for. The future wasn't certain, but with Samuel beside her, Lena knew they could face whatever came. She turned to look at their daughters, who were playing in the distance, their laughter pure and free. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, dreamed of giving her children a life of peace and joy. They were safe now. They were home. Do you think we can give them everything we never had? She asked quietly, watching her girls with a longing in her eyes. We'll give them more than that, Samuel replied. We'll give them a future. Lena squeezed his hand, her heart full. Together, he nodded, his gaze unwavering. Always. And with that, they stood side by side, watching the world unfold before them, a world filled with promise, with love, and with the certainty that, no matter what came next, they would face it together. Their journey had been long, but it had led them here to a future they could finally call their own. The storm was over. The darkness had passed, and in the light of the new day, Lena and Samuel knew that their love had survived, and that together, They would build the life they deserved.